first section we're going to discuss is identifying common fallacies. So first of all, logic is just the study of the methods and the principles of reasoning. We use logic every day, right? When we're trying to analyze statements, either that we read or that someone says, or even that we're trying to make. So we're always using logic to try to reason through and either conclude something or solve something. So in logic, we've got arguments and we also have fallacies. An argument is just something that uses a set of facts or assumptions, and we've talked about those assumptions before. They're called premises, right, to support a conclusion. And a fallacy is just a deceptive argument. It's an argument where the conclusion is not well supported by the premises. Let's take a look at some common fallacies. So here we're given a fallacy. It's called appeal to popularity. And what we need to do is identify the premise or premises and the conclusion of the argument, and then just briefly describe how the stated fallacy occurs in the argument. So here, the statement is, Ford makes the best pickup trucks in the world. More people drive Ford pickups than any other light truck. So why would this argument be known as a fallacy? Why is it deceptive? Well, the premise here, okay, so I'm going to highlight all the premises in yellow. The premise here is that more people drive Ford than any other light truck. Okay, the conclusion is actually Ford makes the best pickup trucks in the world. So I'm going to highlight conclusion in orange. So the fact that there's large numbers of people that believe or act some way is used inappropriately, kind of like it's used as evidence that the belief or the action is correct. Okay, so that's why this fallacy is known appeal to popularity. So appeal to popularity is in this form right here, which is many people believe, we'll call the statement P, right? In this instance here, more people drive Ford pickups than any other light truck. Okay, so most people think that's true. So therefore, P has to be true. So in other words, therefore, Ford does make the best pickup trucks in the world. So if an argument takes on that form, then the fallacy that is being created is called appeal to popularity. So again, it's saying that the fact that large numbers of people believe or act in some way is used inappropriately. As evidence that the belief or action is correct. Let's take a look at another type of fallacy. I'll leave that question there for you all to try on your own. You want to identify the premise or premises, the conclusion, and then just briefly describe how the stated fallacy occurs in the argument. Okay, another fallacy is called false cause. And here the question is, or the statement rather is, I placed the quartz crystal on my forehead and in 5 minutes my headache was gone. The crystal made my headache go away. Okay, so let's highlight first. The premise here, right, is that I placed a crystal on my forehead, and there's another premise, another statement. In 5 minutes my headache was gone. Okay, what conclusion comes from that argument is that the crystal made my headache go away. So why is this called false cause? So the fact that one event came before the other, so for instance, putting the crystal on your forehead and then your headache was gone, that incorrectly is taken as evidence that because the quartz crystal was on your forehead, that it caused the headache to go away. So the fact that one event came before the other is incorrectly taken as evidence that the first event caused the second event. And just like appeal to popularity has a certain form, so does false cause. So it basically is like in this form, A, we'll call it event A, came before event B. So therefore, A caused B. And we know that that's not necessarily the case. Here's another type of fallacy. It's called appeal to ignorance. The statement says scientists have not found any concrete evidence of aliens visiting Earth. Therefore, anyone who claims to have seen a UFO must be hallucinating. Okay, so let's do premises in yellow first, right? So one of my premises is that there's no proof that aliens have visited the Earth, right? So scientists have not found any concrete evidence of aliens visiting Earth. My conclusion is that aliens have not visited the Earth, right? So anyone who claims to have seen a UFO must be hallucinating, which just means aliens must not have visited Earth. Okay, so here, appeal to ignorance, this statement uses ignorance, and ignorance, remember, is just lack of knowledge, right? So it uses someone's lack of knowledge about the truth of a proposition to conclude the opposite. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, in other words. So it uses ignorance about the truth of a proposition to conclude the opposite. So in other words, since there have been, there's no evidence of aliens visiting Earth, you can say, well, then aliens do not exist. Well, just because you don't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? Like, I can't always see the moon, but I know that it exists. And I can't see the sun at night, but I know that it exists. Okay, so here's a little quote to think about. An absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So what does that mean? It means that just because you don't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And appeal to ignorance has a specific format too. And it's basically, there is no proof that P is true. Remember, P is just a statement. So here it's, there's no proof that aliens exist. Okay, so therefore, P is false. So since there's no evidence that aliens exist, then aliens don't exist, right? But that is an appeal to ignorance. That's a fallacy. So here we have some other fallacies, and I'm going to let you try these on your own. We've got a fallacy called hasty generalization. We've got another one called limited choice, appeal to emotion, personal attack, circular reasoning, diversion, and straw man. And what I'd like you to do is highlight the premises or premise, highlight the conclusion, and then think about why the argument that's being made is a fallacy. And feel free to use, some type of AI. You can type in the name of the fallacy and try to apply what you're reading to what the statement is saying and think about why it's a false statement. The other thing that you can use AI for is to try to figure out what the form of the argument would be. So for instance, in some of the previous ones, like false cause, I wrote down, why is this statement an example of false cause? And then I wrote down the form of the argument. All of these fallacies have different forms. Now, in the media, we see a lot of information. We see statements, we see graphs, as we saw in the last chapter when we looked at data analysis. So when you're looking at media information, and this could be anything, like on Instagram, TikTok, newspapers, websites, there's 5 steps you want to use to evaluate that media information. The first step is you always want to consider the source. Just because someone thinks they're an expert on something doesn't mean that they are. Okay? So you also want to ask yourself 2 questions. Is it the original source? Or did someone manipulate it? And does the source have credibility? So in other words, can you trust the source? The second thing you want to check is always check the date. When was the information that you're reading written? The third thing you want to do is validate for accuracy. Okay, so can you validate from other sources? I always like to check at least 5 sources. You want to watch for any hidden agendas. Okay, is the information presented fairly or objectively? Was there bias? Favoritism or leaning to one side? And don't miss the big picture. Okay, so consider whether, the media makes sense. So let's apply those 5 steps to this statement here. There was a claim made about Mars. On August 27th, Mars will look as large and bright as the full moon. Don't miss it because no one alive today will ever see this again. So let's say that was a claim that was made, which it was. Okay, we're going to go through each of the steps. First of all, what is the source? Okay, we don't have the source here. It was just a statement made, so it's not given. So that would make me be a little bit suspicious. Okay, the second is the date, right? It tells me August 27th, but there's no year listed, right? So that would also make me suspicious. Are they talking about, is this a yearly event? Is it every 100 years? Is it monthly? What's going on? Okay, we're going to check accuracy. So we would want to check some websites, which it's easy enough to do. You can go on and look at like NASA, for instance, right? So I can go in here and I can type in even just that statement. So okay, so I'm typing in this statement and see what comes up. So automatically here we have an AI overview that the statement is false, right? And then it gives some explanations. There's a misinterpretation of a close approach. I guess this was some hoax. No naked eye visibility. Even when closest to Earth, Mars will be significantly smaller than the moon and can only be seen as a small red dot. And also check reliable sources. So always verify astronomical claims with credible sources, like I mentioned earlier, like NASA or any reputable astronomy websites. So there's a couple things that are coming up here. One in Reuters, Mars will not appear as big as the moon on August 27th. Mars email a hoax. That's from National Geographic. So just looking at that statement and typing it into Google, you're able to find that it's not very accurate. So for accuracy, you want to check any reliable sources, which is so easy to do now with the web and with AI. So check reliable websites or sources, right? It doesn't have to be a website. It could be something else. So for example, NASA, and this, as we saw, was a false claim. And it's made every time Mars is opposite the sun. The next thing we want to look at are any hidden agendas. Okay, so, it doesn't seem like there's any obvious agendas. I don't know what someone would, benefit from making a false claim like this. So there's none obvious. It just maybe is a misstatement. And then the fifth thing you want to check is look at the big picture. Okay, so, if you just think about this for a second, right? Does this claim make sense? So Mars could never appear as large and bright as the moon because even at its closest, as that one article said that we looked at when we were searching, I don't know if you all know this, Mars is 150 times as far from the Earth as the moon is, right? So even when Mars is the closest, it's still not going to be as bright as the moon because the moon is closer. So Mars could never appear as large and bright as the moon. Because even at its closest, Mars is 150 times as far from the Earth as the moon is. And that ends our lesson on looking at arguments and fallacies and being able to identify common fallacies, just to be able to think through statements and go through these steps and understand, like, is there a source and is it credible? When was this statement made? How accurate is it, which you can easily check on, on the internet. And then, are there any hidden agendas? And think about the overall big picture, okay? And you want to analyze different statements for any fallacies, okay? Which is, the wrong. It's not a logical argument to make. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson. And if you have any questions, please reach out.